The grand chambers of the Galactic Summit shimmered with brilliance, an awe-inspiring display of wealth and power from the galaxy's most dominant species. Delegates from across the stars were gathered in an amphitheater that dwarfed even the largest battlecruisers. The air crackled with tension, the weight of millennia-old rivalries palpable. At the center of it all, the Xathar Empire sat proudly, their massive presence undeniable. Their leader, General Soreth, with his cold black eyes and towering stature, was the living embodiment of conquest and military might. Around him, other species, the Kilrath, with their muscular, war-hardened forms, and the Jeri, whose psychic abilities made them feared in negotiations, chatted amongst themselves in a display of dominance. In a far, dimly lit corner of the chamber sat humanity's delegation, barely noticeable amidst the grandeur. Admiral Jane Carter, calm and composed, observed the proceedings with keen eyes. She was shorter than most in the room, her uniform a simple dark blue, without the elaborate decorations worn by other military officers. Next to her sat Lieutenant Race, his young face betraying an unease that had been growing since they'd arrived. The Galactic Summit had long been a stage where power was flaunted, where races with massive fleets and sprawling empires flexed their muscles for political gain. Humanity, the most recent addition to the Council, was often treated as an afterthought. Their ships were smaller, their territory limited to a few systems on the fringes of the galaxy. To many of the elder races, they were insignificant newcomers, worth little more than a passing glance. As the delegates milled about, exchanging pleasantries and sly insults, the subject of humanity inevitably arose. "Ah, the tiny fleet," one Kilrath officer sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. "I'm surprised they even bothered coming this year." A round of laughter followed, rippling through the room. The Xathar delegates chuckled as well, their amusement at humanity's expense evident. "It's a marvel they've survived this long," another voice added, this time from a Jari diplomat, his elongated psychic tendril swaying lazily. "Perhaps they're here to beg for protection." The laughter grew louder, and Race clenched his fists, glaring at the offending parties. His breath quickened with barely restrained anger, but a subtle glance from Admiral Carter stopped him from reacting. "Let them laugh," she said softly, her voice barely audible amidst the noise. "It's what they do best." Carter's tone was calm, almost detached, as if the mockery had little effect on her. She was no stranger to it. Humanity had faced ridicule ever since they'd been granted a seat at the table. But Carter knew something the others didn't, something they were all too arrogant to see. In the center of the chamber, General Soreth rose to his full, imposing height, drawing the room's attention like a gravitational force. His presence commanded silence. His silver armor gleamed under the artificial lights, and the room fell still as his deep, rumbling voice filled the chamber. "The Xathar Empire has grown stronger than ever," Soreth began, his tone measured and authoritative. "We have expanded our borders, forged new alliances, and demonstrated the might of our fleets. And yet there are those among us," his eyes flickered briefly toward Carter, "who believe they can stand against the tide of history." He paused, letting the weight of his words hang in the air. The implication was clear. No one could challenge the Xathar. Certainly not humanity. Carter met his gaze evenly, showing no reaction. Soreth's eyes narrowed for a fraction of a second before he continued. "The outer rim is ripe for claiming. Resistance is futile. And yet, we hear rumors of certain minor races seeking protection." Soreth's lips curled into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Protection from those who can barely protect themselves." A low murmur spread through the chamber. Carter remained still, her expression unreadable. The comment was aimed directly at humanity, but she wasn't about to rise to the bait. She knew what this was. A power play, a test of composure. She had no intention of giving Soreth the satisfaction of seeing her rattle. "Admiral, why do we put up with this?" Race whispered, barely containing his frustration. Carter glanced at him and gave the barest hint of a smile. Because soon, Lieutenant, they'll have much more important things to worry about than their egos. At that moment, an encrypted message flashed on her personal console, hidden from view of the others. It was from the Talpid envoy, confirming their desperate plea for aid in the Outer Rim. Carter's eyes hardened. She stood and quietly excused herself from the chamber, unnoticed by the rest of the room. The tiny fleet was about to show the galaxy just how dangerous it could be. The dim glow of the command console cast a shadow across Admiral Carter's face as she walked through the empty corridors of the human delegation's quarters. The encrypted message still pulsed on her wrist device, its urgency unmistakable. With each step, her calm exterior cracked ever so slightly, revealing the weight of what was coming. She tapped a command on her device, and the holographic message unfolded in front of her. The familiar, panicked face of Talpid envoy Rathik flickered to life. The Talpids were known for their advanced technological minds and their tactical prowess, but not for their combat skills. Rathik's multi-eyed visage twitched nervously as he spoke. "Admiral Carter," he began, voice strained, "the Cathar are moving faster than anticipated. Their fleet will reach our homeworld within the next standard cycle. We have no defenses left. We need assistance." He hesitated, as if even asking for help hurt his pride. "We are willing to offer full technological support to humanity in exchange for your intervention. Without you, our worlds will fall. We beg you, help us." The message ended, leaving the air thick with unspoken tension. Carter clenched her jaw. She had known that Cathar were expanding aggressively, but this was worse than she thought. The Outer Rim, long considered neutral territory, was becoming a war zone. The Cathar Empire's expansion showed no signs of slowing, and their next conquest would be the Talpid worlds, a series of highly advanced systems critical to the galaxy's technological infrastructure. Lieutenant Rice entered the room, his face still reflecting the frustration he felt back in the summit hall. "Admiral," he began cautiously, "I don't know how much longer we can just sit there and take it. The entire council's laughing at us. And now this message. What are we going to do? We can't let the Cathar wipe out the Talpids, but we also can't go toe-to-toe with them. Our fleet is." Carter held up a hand to silence him. Her mind was already working at light speed, calculating every possible outcome. "Riz," she said, her tone sharp and clear, "we're not going to go toe-to-toe with them. That's what the Cathar want. They expect brute force, and they want us to think that's the only option." Rice frowned, the tension in his shoulders barely easing. "Then what's the plan, ma'am?" "We'll give them exactly what they don't expect," Carter replied, her voice edged with determination. She turned back to the hologram of the Talpid envoy, activating the secure transmission. "Envoy Rathik," she began, staring into the glowing blue projection. "You will have our support, but I need you to understand something. The Cathar think we're weak because of the size of our fleet. They believe their numbers and power will win the day, but we're not going to fight their war. We fight ours." The Talpid's eyes blinked in rapid succession, reflecting both relief and confusion. "What do you mean, Admiral?" Carter allowed herself a small, confident smile. "We don't rely on size. Our fleet may be smaller, but every ship we have is equipped with technology that Cathar haven't even dreamed of. We don't need to overwhelm them. We just need to outthink them. I need your full cooperation. Share your sensor data with us. Give us access to your communications grid, and we'll take care of the rest. The Cathar won't even know what hit them." Rathik hesitated but then nodded, trusting in her confidence. "You have it. Everything we have is yours." As the transmission ended, Race still looked uneasy. "With all due respect, Admiral, are you sure this is the right call? Even with advanced tech, we're sending a fleet of ships that's barely a tenth the size of the Cathar armée." Carter gave him a piercing look, her gaze unyielding. "That's exactly what they think. The Cathar are counting on us being afraid. They're counting on us to fight conventionally. But here's the thing, Rice. We're not like them. Humanity didn't rise from Earth because we were the strongest. We rose because we adapt. And now we're going to show them what happens when you underestimate that." Riz nodded slowly, a mixture of admiration and determination settling over him. He stood straighter, some of his earlier tension easing. "Understood, Admiral. I'll prepare the fleet." Carter watched him go, her mind already shifting to the battle ahead. She knew this mission wasn't just about saving the Talpids. It was about proving humanity's place in the galaxy. The summit, the sneers, the laughter, they all thought the tiny fleet was a joke. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. She sent out the command. Every ship, every crew member, prepare for deployment. The tiny fleet was about to show its teeth. The Cathar Armada loomed like a wall of darkness over the outer rim. Thousands of massive warships lined up in perfect formation. Their sleek obsidian hulls absorbed the light of distant stars, giving them an ominous, almost ghostly appearance as they advanced through the void. The Talpid homeworlds were their target, and nothing in their path had survived before. The Cathar were a force of nature, moving with terrifying precision, and behind them lay a trail of shattered planets and broken civilizations. On board the Wrath of Zalith, the flagship of the Cathar fleet, General Sorath stood at the command deck, staring coldly at the holographic display of the Talpid systems. His eyes flicked over the map, identifying key targets and calculating how long it would take for his fleet to crush any resistance. His orders were simple: take the Talpid homeworlds, wipe out their defenses, and ensure that the Cathar controlled the outer rim. At his side, Lieutenant Varen, one of his most trusted advisors, reviewed the incoming data with a frown. "General, we've picked up some unusual movement near the Talpid systems. It seems the humans have deployed a fleet in response to the distress signal." Sorath let out a low, mocking laugh. "The humans? What fleet could they possibly muster to stand against us? Their ships are like gnats compared to ours. They can't seriously believe they stand a chance." Varen hesitated, glancing at the data once more. "It's true their numbers are insignificant compared to ours, but their timing is odd. They've positioned their ships in a defensive pattern near the Talpid outposts, and they're not moving to engage directly. It's almost as if what, Lieutenant?" Sorath snapped, his patience wearing thin. "As if they're setting something up. Their fleet is too small to mount a serious defense, yet they're not retreating. They're holding their ground, waiting for us. It doesn't add up. Perhaps we should proceed with caution." Sorath waved a dismissive hand, his black eyes gleaming with arrogance. "Proceed with caution? Against humans? No, Varen. This is a show of force. Their hesitation is nothing but fear, and their inaction is a sign of their weakness. The humans are trying to buy time, probably hoping for some miracle diplomacy from the Galactic Summit. We will crush them here and now, and the galaxy will see their so-called tiny fleet for what it truly is: a joke." The general's voice echoed across the command deck, and his subordinates nodded in agreement, though a few of them shared Varen's unease. The humans' movements were too deliberate, too calculated for a fleet that was supposedly outmatched. But questioning Sorath's authority was not an option. So they remained silent. Sorath issued the order: deploy the first wave of dreadnoughts, smash their defenses, and let's make this quick. Meanwhile, aboard the human flagship Defiance, Admiral Carter stood at the heart of a very different scene. Unlike the massive crowded bridge of the Cathar flagship, the Defiance was sleek and quiet, its systems humming softly as the crew worked in disciplined unison. The human fleet was small but agile, its ships built for precision and speed, with advanced technology designed to outmaneuver the brute strength of their enemies. Carter's face remained calm, but her sharp eyes took in every detail of the unfolding battle. On her display, she could see the Cathar fleet moving into position, their ships forming an overwhelming wall of firepower. "They've taken the bait," Carter said quietly, her voice steady. "They're moving in without assessing our capabilities. Typical Cathar arrogance." Lieutenant Reyes stood at her side, his face a mixture of awe and tension. "It's hard to believe, Admiral. They're coming in with full force, and it's like they don't even care about strategy. They're just relying on their size." "That's their greatest weakness," Carter replied. "They assume their numbers and firepower will always win the day. But we've spent decades studying how they fight. We know their patterns, their weaknesses. They think we're afraid of them, but fear isn't a part of the equation. Strategy is." She tapped a few commands into the console, activating the fleet's stealth technology. The human ships, small and unassuming, began to shimmer as their cloaking systems engaged. The XFR, moving blindly forward, had no idea what was waiting for them. "Now," Carter said, her voice tightening with resolve, "we begin." The human fleet, hidden in the vastness of space, suddenly shifted into action. Rather than charging head-on into the Xathar armada, they split into dozens of small, highly coordinated formations. Each group moved with surgical precision, their paths designed to exploit the Xathar's slow, lumbering formations. Advanced cloaking tech made the human ships flicker in and out of visibility, causing confusion among the Xathar ranks. On board the Wrath of Zalith, Soreth's confidence faltered as his officers struggled to make sense of the reports. "Sir, we're losing visual on the human ships. They're disappearing from our scanners, then reappearing in new positions." Varen, watching the chaos unfold, spoke up again. "I told you, General, they aren't fighting us directly. They're picking us apart." Soreth's fist slammed onto the console. "Impossible. Find them. Destroy them all." But it was already too late. The humans were no longer playing by the Xathar's rules. The battle had begun, and the galaxy's most feared empire was about to face an enemy they had grossly underestimated. The human fleet, now completely cloaked, moved like specters across the battlefield. Unlike the Xathar's massive warships, lumbering through space with brute force, humanity's vessels darted in quick, precise formations. Every ship was equipped with advanced stealth technology and superior sensor systems, a testament to their reliance on ingenuity over sheer numbers. The XFR, blind to this new style of warfare, continued their advance, convinced they would soon crush their vastly smaller opponent. Admiral Carter stood on the bridge of the Defiance, her gaze fixed on the battle unfolding before her. Holographic projections displayed the positions of both fleets, though only her own ships were visible on the screen. The Xathar dreadnoughts, massive and slow, formed an impenetrable wall, moving steadily forward like an unstoppable wave. But Carter wasn't interested in their size. She was interested in their vulnerability. "Lieutenant Reyes," Carter said, her voice calm but sharp with intent, "execute Phase 1. Reyes, standing at his station, gave a curt nod. "Yes, Admiral." He tapped a series of commands into the console, and the orders were transmitted instantly across the human fleet. Hundreds of tiny, specialized drones detached from the human ships, undetectable by the Xathar's outdated sensors. The drones moved silently toward the enemy fleet, each one carrying a payload designed to disable systems rather than cause direct damage. They attached themselves to the Xathar dreadnoughts, unnoticed by the crews inside. And then, with surgical precision, they activated. Suddenly, chaos erupted within the Xathar fleet. On board the Wrath of Zalith, General Soreth watched in stunned silence as his warships faltered. Consoles flickered, engines sputtered, and weapons systems went offline. The Xathar dreadnoughts, once the epitome of military power, now drifted aimlessly, their systems disrupted by a force they couldn't even see. "Status report," Soreth barked, his voice dripping with fury. "We've lost control of several dreadnoughts, General," one of the technicians stammered, his hands shaking as he worked to restore systems. "It appears that something has interfered with our communications and targeting systems. We're trying to reboot, but the disruptions are widespread." Soreth's black eyes narrowed, fury bubbling beneath his calm exterior. "What do you mean something? What are they doing to us?" They've disabled key systems remotely. We can't track their ships. It's like fighting shadows. Varen, standing nearby, clenched his jaw, a grim understanding settling over him. The humans knew. They knew exactly how we would respond. This is no frontal assault, General. They're dismantling us, piece by piece. Soreth slammed his fist into the console, the force of the impact reverberating through the room. Find them. I don't care what it takes. I want those ships destroyed. On board the Defiance, Carter watched as the Cathar fleet struggled to recover, their hulking ships now little more than massive targets. Phase 1 is complete, Reyes reported, his voice betraying a hint of excitement. Their systems are crippled. They'll take hours to reboot fully. Carter allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. Perfect. Let's move to Phase 2. Focus fire on their propulsion systems. Make sure they can't follow us. With precision and efficiency, the human ships emerged from their cloaked positions. In tight, coordinated groups, they opened fire on the Cathar dreadnoughts, targeting engines and thrusters with pinpoint accuracy. Advanced ion cannons delivered bursts of energy that disabled propulsion systems, leaving the massive Cathar ships dead in the water. The humans didn't linger long in one position. As soon as they struck, they'd vanished again, slipping back into the shadows before the Cathar could retaliate. To the Cathar crews, it was like fighting ghosts. Every time they tried to track the human ships, they were gone, only to reappear somewhere else, delivering another precise blow. Soreth's frustration boiled over as he watched his mighty fleet flounder. His ships, each a symbol of the Cathar's dominance, were now sitting ducks, slowly drifting without engines or weapons. This isn't possible, he growled, pacing the command deck. How can a fleet this small cripple us so completely? Varen, always the voice of reason, spoke cautiously. They've studied us, General. They've found our blind spots, our reliance on overwhelming force, and our lack of technological adaptability. The humans have outmaneuvered us in ways we didn't anticipate. Soreth's fists clenched at his sides. He hated to admit it, but Varen was right. The humans weren't fighting the way he expected them to. They weren't engaging in a traditional battle. They were exploiting every vulnerability, turning the Cathar's own strength against them. Order the remaining operational ships to fall back, Soreth commanded, his voice tight with anger. We need to regroup before we're torn apart completely. As the Cathar fleet began a hasty retreat, the human ships did not pursue. Carter watched them go, her expression unreadable. Let them run, she said softly. We've made our point. Reyes, standing beside her, exhaled slowly, the tension easing from his body. We did it, Admiral. We forced them to retreat. This isn't over, Carter replied, her voice calm but resolute. They'll regroup, and next time, they'll come back with everything they have. She turned to face the crew, but now, the galaxy knows something they didn't before. We're not weak. We're not defenseless. And the Cathar, they'll never underestimate humanity again. The Cathar fleet retreated, leaving behind the hulking remains of their once proud dreadnoughts, drifting powerless through space. But for Admiral Carter and the human fleet, there was no time to celebrate. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. Back on the bridge of the Defiance, Carter's face was set in a grim expression. She knew the Cathar wouldn't take this defeat lying down. They were a ruthless empire, bred for conquest, and they had now suffered a humiliating loss at the hands of a fleet they had fought beneath their notice. Their pride was wounded, and nothing was more dangerous than a wounded beast. Lieutenant Reyes, standing next to her, glanced at the tactical display. We've successfully pushed them out of Talpid space, Admiral. No signs of further movement from their remaining ships. Looks like they're regrouping at their forward base. Carter nodded, her eyes fixed on the map. For now. But they'll come back, and when they do, it won't be with just dreadnoughts and brute force. They'll adapt, just like we did. The thought lingered in the air, heavy with unspoken tension. The Xathar weren't known for subtlety, but they weren't stupid either. This defeat had shaken them, and when they returned, it would be with a plan. Carter knew they were already recalculating, reconsidering their approach. The next wave would be even deadlier. A comm signal lit up on the console, and a familiar voice crackled through. "Admiral Carter, this is Talpid Envoy Rathik. We've analyzed the aftermath of the battle. Your tactics were beyond impressive. The Xathar have never been defeated so thoroughly in such a short engagement. The Talpid Council is deeply in your debt." Carter's lips pressed into a thin line. "Envoy Rathik, the Xathar will come back. They don't take defeat lightly. And next time, they won't be so easy to outmaneuver." Rathik's voice betrayed a hint of nervousness. What do you suggest? We've given you everything we can in terms of technology. But if the Xathar escalate..." "They will escalate," Carter interrupted, her voice cool and commanding. "And when they do, we need to be ready. We'll use your advanced sensor networks to monitor their movements. But that's not enough. I need to know if the Talpid defense systems can be reactivated." There was a pause before Rathik responded, his tone cautious. "Our defense systems have been dormant for decades. We decommissioned most of our heavy weaponry when we joined the Galactic Council. We believed we wouldn't need them again." Carter's eyes narrowed. "It's time to bring them back online. The Xathar aren't just going to attack us. They'll go after your planets, your infrastructure, your people. You have to be ready to defend yourselves." Rathik hesitated before answering, his voice heavy with reluctance. "I'll relay your message to the Council, but the Talpids have grown accustomed to peace. Convincing them to reactivate the defense systems will be difficult." Carter leaned forward, her voice hard. "Do whatever it takes, Rathik. The Xathar won't wait for diplomacy. If you're not ready, they'll burn your worlds to the ground." The transmission ended, and Carter leaned back in her chair, her mind racing through the possibilities. She knew Rathik was right. The Talpids had become complacent in their technological superiority, relying on their advancements to shield them from danger. But that mindset would be their downfall if the Xathar returned before they were ready. Meanwhile, deep in Xathar space, General Soreth stood before the massive tactical display aboard the Wrath of Zalith, his eyes scanning the data on humanity's tiny fleet. His fury at the recent defeat had not subsided, but now it was tempered by cold calculation. "Humans," he muttered under his breath, staring at the images of their sleek, agile ships. "They've humiliated us. But that was only the beginning. We underestimated them once. That mistake will not be repeated." At his side, Lieutenant Varen stepped forward, bringing up a new set of data. "General, we've completed our analysis. The human success was due in large part to their advanced cloaking technology and their superior maneuverability. If we can counter those two factors, we can neutralize their advantage." Soreth's black eyes gleamed with renewed purpose. "And how do we do that, Lieutenant?" Varen activated the holographic map, showing several red dots clustered around a section of human-controlled space. "We believe the humans' cloaking technology relies on energy signatures that our current sensors are unable to detect. However, we've begun upgrading our sensor arrays to detect subspace distortions, which should give us a way to track their ships, even while cloaked." Soreth nodded slowly, his mind already racing ahead to the next steps. "Good, but that won't be enough. We need to strike at their heart, disrupt their supply lines, destabilize their alliances. If we cripple their infrastructure, their fleet will fall apart." Varen hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "There's one more thing, General. The humans' tactics were surprisingly coordinated. Their fleet may be small, but their strategic planning was flawless. It's possible they've received assistance from the Talpids or other factions. We should consider targeting their allies as well." Soreth's lips curled into a cold smile. "Yes, we'll make sure they have no one left to turn to." The stage was set for the Xathar's next move. With their technological advantage slipping and their numbers dwarfed, Humanity would face a new kind of war, one where every ally and resource would be targeted. The Cathar had learned their lesson. And now, the true retaliation was about to begin. The cold emptiness of space stretched before the human fleet, but Admiral Carter knew that the peace was a fragile illusion. The Cathar hadn't been idle since their retreat. Intelligence reports had been flooding in for weeks, small skirmishes on the borders, mysterious disappearances of supply convoys, and rumors of Cathar agents infiltrating key diplomatic channels. The Cathar were preparing for something much larger, and Carter was certain they wouldn't wait long to strike. On board the Defiance, Carter reviewed the latest reports. Every piece of intel pointed to the same conclusion. The Cathar were no longer just interested in a direct assault. They were planning to strangle humanity's alliances and resources. The Talpids were the first obvious target, but now it seemed that Cathar had expanded their sights. "Admiral," Lieutenant Rice called, breaking her thoughts. "We've received an urgent transmission from Talpid space." Carter's jaw tightened as she turned to the comm station. "Put it through." The screen flickered to life, revealing the haggard face of Talpid Envoy Rafik. His usually composed demeanor was now strained, panic barely held in check. "Admiral Carter, the Cathar have begun targeting our outer colonies. They've already destroyed 2 supply depots, and our defense systems aren't fully operational yet. We've taken heavy casualties." Carter's heart sank, though she didn't let it show. She had warned them. The Cathar weren't going to give the Talpids time to prepare, and now they were paying the price for their hesitation. "Envoy, pull back your remaining forces and consolidate around your core worlds," Carter said, her voice firm. "If you stretch your defenses too thin, they'll pick you apart one colony at a time." Rafik nodded, his desperation clear. "We're doing everything we can, but the Cathar's new tactics are different. They're not just attacking military targets. They've started hitting our civilian infrastructure, disrupting communications and energy grids. It's causing chaos, and we're struggling to keep control." Carter's eyes narrowed. This was a new development, and it confirmed her worst suspicions. The Cathar had learned from their defeat. Instead of relying on overwhelming military force, they were now using psychological warfare, destabilizing their enemies from within before striking. "Envoy, hold the line as best you can," Carter replied, her mind already formulating a new strategy. "We'll send reinforcements, but I need to know if your council is ready to reactivate your defense network." Rafik's expression darkened. "They're still debating. Many believe we should sue for peace before the Cathar escalate further." Carter's temper flared, but she forced herself to remain calm. "Peace, the Cathar won't negotiate, Envoy. They've made that clear. If your council doesn't act, you'll be defenseless, and the Cathar will wipe you out." Rafik's face crumpled, fear overtaking his usual diplomatic composure. "I'll do everything I can. But please, Admiral, hurry." The transmission cut off, and the bridge fell silent for a moment. Carter sat back in her chair, her mind racing through the options. The Cathar had moved into the next phase of their strategy, disrupting alliances, causing chaos among the weaker factions, and targeting non-military infrastructure. It was a smart play, and one she hadn't anticipated this early. Now she had to adapt. "Lieutenant Riz," Carter said, turning toward her second-in-command, "assemble the fleet. We're going to need to hit back hard, but we can't afford to engage them in a straight-up fight yet. We need to figure out where their base of operations is and strike there." Riz nodded, already preparing to send out the orders. "Understood, Admiral. What about the Talpids?" "We'll send a contingent to protect their core worlds," Carter replied. "But if they don't get those defense systems online soon, we're not going to be able to hold them off indefinitely." Meanwhile, deep within Cathar space, General Soreth observed the progress of his new campaign with growing satisfaction. His forces had begun infiltrating key Talpid systems, sowing discord and fear. Civilian targets were crumbling under his precision strikes, and it was only a matter of time before the Talpid Council fractured under the pressure. But it wasn't just the Talpids that interested him. Sorath stood in the command center of the Wrath of Zalith, watching as Lieutenant Varin approached with the latest intelligence. "General, our spies report that the human fleet is mobilizing. It seems Admiral Carter is preparing to strike back." Sorath's black eyes glittered with a dangerous gleam. "Good. Let her come. We'll draw her out, just like we planned." Varin activated the tactical display, showing a map of the contested systems. "Our forces are already in position to ambush them. We've seeded false data to make them think we're operating from a base in the Rinthar Nebula. When they arrive, they'll walk right into the trap." Sorath's smile was cold and calculating. "Perfect. The humans may have won the last battle, but they're about to learn that this war is far from over. We'll lure them into a fight they can't win. And this time, we'll make sure there are no survivors." As both sides prepared for the next phase of the conflict, the stakes were rising. Carter knew she couldn't afford to make a single misstep. The future of humanity and its fragile alliances hung in the balance. Meanwhile, Sorath's trap was set, and the Xathar were ready to unleash their full fury on the unsuspecting humans. The game of strategy and survival had just begun, and neither side could afford to lose. Admiral Carter stood at the heart of the Defiance's war room, her eyes fixed on the swirling holographic display of the Rinthar Nebula. The Xathar had chosen their battleground well. An expanse of thick ionized gases and electromagnetic storms that made long-range sensors almost useless. It was the perfect place for an ambush. But Carter knew this wasn't just about fighting on the Xathar's terms. She was about to gamble everything. Lieutenant Rice stepped forward, his face grim. "Admiral, our scouts have confirmed Xathar fleet activity in the region. The nebula's interference makes it hard to get accurate numbers, but they're massing in large numbers." "Exactly what we expected," Carter replied, her voice calm but firm. "They want us to think they're operating out of a base hidden in the nebula. But we know better. This whole thing stinks of a trap." Rice hesitated. "Then why walk into it, Admiral? We could pull back, regroup, and—" "No." Carter's tone brooked no argument. "This is the best chance we'll get. If we back down now, they'll take the initiative. We've studied their patterns, and we know that Xathar thrive on psychological warfare. They want us to hesitate, to second-guess ourselves. But we'll do the unexpected." Riz nodded slowly, understanding. "We'll spring their trap." Carter allowed herself a small smile. "Exactly. We're going to walk right into their ambush, but on our terms. If we play this right, the Xathar will be the ones caught in the net." She turned to the tactical display, bringing up a map of the human fleet. "Our stealth capabilities give us the edge in this environment. We'll use the nebula's interference to cloak our real numbers. They'll think we're committing our entire fleet to this fight, but we'll hold half of our forces in reserve. Once they make their move, we'll strike from the shadows." The plan was risky. No, it was outright dangerous. But Carter knew that in this war, conventional thinking was a death sentence. The Xathar had already adapted their tactics, focusing on guerrilla warfare and psychological strikes. It was time for humanity to push back, to take control of the battlefield once more. Far away, aboard the Wrath of Zalith, General Sorath stood at the helm, watching the nebulous clouds of the Rinthar Nebula swirl like a living storm outside the viewport. His patience was wearing thin, but he knew it wouldn't be long now. The humans would arrive soon, lured by the false intelligence his agents had planted. Carter was smart, but even she couldn't resist the chance to deal a decisive blow to the Xathar's supposed stronghold. Beside him, Varin monitored the incoming data streams, his fingers tapping nervously on the console. "The human fleet is approaching, General. They've entered the outer edge of the nebula." Sorath's black eyes glittered with satisfaction. "Just as we planned. Are the strike teams in position?" "Yes, General. The ambush is set. The moment they're deep enough into the nebula, we'll surround them and cut off their escape." Soreth's smile was predatory. Good. Let them come. Once they're inside, they'll be blind, deaf, and helpless. We'll crush them from all sides. As the human fleet entered the swirling mists of the Rinthar Nebula, Carter could feel the tension on the bridge mounting. The usual hum of activity had become subdued, the crew working with quiet efficiency as they prepared for what was to come. Every second that passed felt like the tightening of a noose. They were heading straight into the Xathar's jaws. "Status report," Carter called out, breaking the silence. Riz checked the readouts. "All ships are holding position, cloaked and ready. The Xathar haven't detected us yet, but they're spreading out, searching for us." Carter's eyes narrowed. "Good. Let them keep looking. As soon as they think they've found us, we'll spring the trap." The fleet moved deeper into the nebula, the swirling gases casting strange, shifting shadows across the ships. It was an eerie environment, perfect for the kind of battle Carter had in mind. But it was also dangerous. One wrong move, and they'd be walking into the Xathar's ambush with no way out. Minutes passed like hours, the tension building as the human ships silently approached the heart of the nebula. And then, without warning, the Xathar made their move. "Multiple contacts," Ray shouted. "Xathar ships converging on us from all directions." The trap had sprung. Xathar warships, dozens of them, appeared out of the nebula's swirling clouds, their weapons charging and ready to unleash hell. But Carter was ready. "Now," she ordered, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. In an instant, the human fleet split into two, half of the ships vanishing back into the nebula's fog. The Xathar, expecting a full engagement, charged forward, unaware that they were walking into Carter's real trap. As the Xathar ships closed in on what they thought was the bulk of the human forces, the reserve fleet struck from the shadows. On the wrath of Zalith, Soreth's satisfaction turned to shock as his tactical display exploded with alerts. "What's happening?" he demanded, his voice rising in fury. "They've split their forces," Varen shouted, scrambling to regain control of the situation. "They're hitting us from behind." Carter's fleet moved with deadly precision, targeting the Xathar ships' weak points and disabling their engines before they could react. The once carefully planned ambush was now a chaotic battlefield, with the Xathar struggling to fight back against an enemy that seemed to strike from every direction at once. On the Defiance, Carter watched the battle unfold, her hand steady as she guided her fleet. "We've got them." Press the attack. The tide had turned, but the battle was far from over. Soreth was a formidable opponent, and Carter knew he wouldn't go down easily. But for the first time, she saw a path to victory, one that would shift the momentum of the war in humanity's favor. As the nebula crackled with the energy of the battle, both fleets fought for survival, knowing that this engagement could decide the fate of the galaxy. The chaos of battle raged within the swirling mists of the Rinthar Nebula, each explosion echoing through the vast emptiness of space. Admiral Carter remained focused, her eyes scanning the tactical display as the screens erupted with the shifting dynamics of the fight. The human fleet had turned the tide, but Soreth was far from defeated. The Xathar general was known for his ruthlessness and strategic cunning, and Carter knew that a counterattack was imminent. "Admiral," Lieutenant Riz shouted over the din of alarms, "the Xathar are regrouping. They're trying to form a defensive line at the nebula's core." Carter clenched her jaw. Soreth was no fool. He'd adjust his tactics to reclaim control of the situation. "We can't let them reestablish their position. Prepare for a full assault on their defensive line." "Understood. We'll need to push through their outer ships quickly before they can reinforce," Reyes responded, fingers flying across the controls to relay the orders. As the human fleet surged forward, Carter felt a rush of adrenaline. This was their moment, the chance to inflict a decisive blow on the Xathar. But as they advanced, she couldn't shake the feeling that Soreth had one last trick up his sleeve. On the wrath of Zalith, General Soreth watched the tactical display with a mixture of anger and admiration. The humans had adapted well, using the nebulous cover to launch their surprise attack. But he wasn't ready to concede defeat. "Send a message to all units," he ordered, his voice low and commanding. "We are not retreating. We will fight to the last ship." "General, we're outnumbered. Our ships are taking heavy damage," Varen cautioned, trying to reason with him. "If we don't pull back now." "No," Soreth snapped, his eyes burning with fury. "We will not allow ourselves to be humiliated again. Prepare to activate the self-destruct sequences on our vessels if necessary. We will take as many of them down with us as we can." Varen's face blanched. "That's a desperate move, General. We can still regroup and fight another day." "This is the day we end this," Soreth interrupted, his voice a low growl. "Let them come." The two fleets collided with renewed ferocity. Human ships advanced, weapons blazing, targeting the Xathar ships with precision. But the Xathar, fueled by rage and desperation, fought back with equal intensity. Explosions lit up the dark expanse as missiles streaked through the nebula, colliding with ships on both sides. "Admiral, they're fighting harder than before. Their ships are becoming reckless," Rhys shouted, his expression taut with concentration. Carter gritted her teeth, realizing the Xathar were indeed becoming more desperate. "That's right. They're lashing out, and we can use that to our advantage. Redirect our fire to target their lead ships and push them toward the outer edges of the nebula." As the human ships pressed their attack, Carter's mind raced through the possibilities. They needed to disrupt the Xathar's command structure, sow confusion among their ranks, and expose their weaknesses. Suddenly, a massive explosion rocked the Defiance, sending alarms blaring throughout the ship. Carter braced herself against the console, her heart racing. "Report. Direct hit from a plasma cannon. Minor damage to the hull, but we're still operational," a crew member called out. "Reinforce our shields on the starboard side," Carter commanded, feeling the pressure mounting. "And keep up the offensive." As the battle continued to rage, Soreth's determination only grew stronger. He knew they were at a critical juncture. His ships were taking heavy losses, but he refused to yield. "All units, prepare to engage the self-destruct sequences. We will take the humans with us." "General," Varen shouted, panic evident in his voice. "The humans are surrounding us. If we activate the self-destruct now, we risk hitting our own ships." Sensing the danger, Soreth's resolve wavered. "Then we must target their command ship first. It's the key to their operations." He activated the tactical display, bringing up a target lock on the Defiance. "Fire all weapons at my command." Just as he was about to give the order, a brilliant flash of light erupted outside the viewport, catching his attention. The humans had maneuvered a small contingent of stealth ships around the perimeter, catching the Xathar off guard. They launched a barrage of torpedoes directly at the Wrath of Zalith.